It had been 15 summers since I left Nantucket, and I swore I'd never come back. But there I was again, driving along the narrow road that curled between dunes and hydrangeas, windows down, air thick with salt and memory. The ocean looked exactly the same. I didn't. When the invitation arrived, alumni weekend, class of 10, I almost threw it away. But something in me, the stubborn architect who needed to see the cracks up close, decided to go. Maybe I wanted to prove I built something stronger than what broke me. Maybe I just wanted to see their faces. The inn looked like nostalgia had been scrubbed and whitewashed. Fairy lights strung across the courtyard, tables dressed in linen, laughter that came too easily. I stepped out of my rental car in a navy dress that didn't scream success but whispered it. Gold sandals, hair swept up, and the ring. A simple gold band on my right hand. Smooth, no stone, no engraving. Liam gave it to me 2 years ago when we completed the greenhousing project in Cape Cod. You build foundations that last, he'd said. I never took it off. People assumed what they wanted. I never corrected them. The first person I recognized was Elise, still laughing too loudly, still drinking too early. Natalie Pierce, she gasped, clutching my arm. You look amazing. Oh my God, Boston must be treating you well. Are you? She paused, eyes flicking to my hand. I smiled. Working too much. That always satisfied people. They like women who choose ambition as long as it looks lonely. Inside the hall, a jazz trio played something that pretended to be lighthearted. Waiters drifted with trays of rose. The chatter was familiar: babies, promotions, second marriages, divorces, and detoxes. Everyone auditioning for each other's envy. Is he coming? Elise asked quietly, pretending to study the appetizer spread. Who? She gave me that look only old friends can, half pity, half curiosity. Ethan. My smile didn't waver. He usually does. He likes audiences. Ethan Caldwell. The first man I ever drew a life with. Literally. We met in architecture class. He sketched cities, I built homes. We dreamed of restoring Nantucket's forgotten houses, marrying design and memory. He proposed under the lighthouse the night before graduation. 6 months later, I found out he'd been restoring something else, with Ava, my best friend. I left before the wedding, changed cities, changed my name on every blueprint. I hadn't seen them since. The crowd shifted. A murmur spread through the room, that subtle ripple people make when something worth watching walks in. I turned slow, steady. There he was. Ethan Caldwell. Same jawline, same practiced smile, just a touch more self-importance. And beside him, Ava, the ghost of my 20s wearing a pastel dress and a diamond that caught every light. I could almost hear the whispered commentary around me. Oh God, that's her. The ex. The one who left. The one he replaced. They moved like a performance. His hand on her back, her laugh a beat too bright. He was still charming, still rehearsed. I was no longer his audience. When our eyes met, it lasted half a second too long. He blinked first. Nat, he said, crossing the room. Wow, you look good. Good. The compliment people give when they're measuring damage. You too, I said evenly. Marriage suits you. Ava smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Natalie, it's been forever. We were just saying how we hoped you'd come. Were you? Her laugh stuttered. Of course. It wouldn't be the same without you. I sipped my wine. No, I suppose it wouldn't. They mingled. I drifted. The band played something soft. But everywhere I went, I felt eyes flick toward my hand. The ring. The small, quiet circle that glowed under the candlelight. Someone whispered, is she married now? Another voice answered, I heard she's engaged. Some architect in Boston. I didn't correct them. Let them believe whatever made the story more interesting. Across the room, I caught Ethan watching me. Not constantly, but often enough. The kind of glances that ask questions they have no right to. And then, of course, Elise cornered me by the dessert table. So, she said, eyes wide. Should I be congratulating you or what? On what? She pointed discreetly to my hand. That ring. It's gorgeous. It's work-related. Her brow furrowed. That's not how people are seeing it. People can see whatever they want, I said. They usually do. Later, as the night deepened, the alumni coordinator clinked a glass for a toast. To old friends, new lives, and summer memories that never fade. Laughter, cheers, camera flashes. Ethan raised his glass toward me. To second chances, he said loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear. I smiled slowly. To the people who finally earned them. The laughter faltered for half a second, just long enough. I saw it then, the flicker of irritation in his eyes. The old game of power and perception. But something was different this time. I wasn't the one on the defensive. When the group began moving outside toward the fire pit, I followed at a distance. The ocean glowed faintly under the moonlight. Ava clung to his arm, drunk on wine and validation. He thrived on it, the public devotion, the curated narrative. And yet, when she looked away, his eyes found mine again. Not lust. Not nostalgia. Just curiosity. The kind that comes from realizing your old version of someone doesn't exist anymore. He approached slowly, smile softening. You never did tell me what you've been up to. I design things that don't fall apart, I said. He laughed, not sure if it was a joke. You always had a way with words. I met his gaze steady. You always had a way with promises. He looked down, caught the glint of the ring again, and his smile thinned. Didn't take you long to move on, huh? 10 years is long enough. Before he could respond, a voice from behind interrupted. Firm, familiar, male. Natalie, the voice said. I turned. Liam. He wasn't supposed to be here. He stepped forward, hand warm against my back, the picture of calm confidence. Didn't think I'd miss the reunion, did you? Ethan froze. Ava blinked, confused. Liam extended a hand to him. You must be Ethan. I've heard plenty. Likewise, Ethan said slowly. The air between them hummed with tension. And then, under the golden light of the bonfire, Liam looked down at my hand, at the ring, and smiled in a way that made every assumption in that courtyard come true. Shall we? He asked. And as we walked past Ethan and Ava, conversations stopped. Heads turned. The sound of the ocean swallowed everything except one truth. Sometimes justice doesn't need a gavel. It just needs timing. Liam's hand at the small of my back wasn't possessive. It was grounding. The kind carpenters use on unstable beams, steady, patient, certain the structure can hold if someone believes in it long enough. Didn't expect you, I murmured as we stepped through the glow of the fire pit. He smiled with his eyes first, then his mouth. I had a site visit on the Cape. Figured the ferry owed me a favor. The circle of classmates loosened to let us in. The heat of the fire licked my cheeks. The ocean threaded cool air through my hair. The jazz trio had drifted outside, the saxophone sketching something slow and sure across the night. Ethan watched us from the opposite side of the flames, jaw set like a line he couldn't redraw. Ava leaned toward him, whispering. Her eyes cut to my hand, to the slim gold ring, to Liam's thumb brushing mine in a way that made rumor feel like proof. Drink? Liam asked. Water, I said. I want to remember every second. We found a spot on the low stone wall just outside the circle. The seagrass hissed softly. A waiter passed. Liam caught 2 sparkling waters with the ease of a person who's learned the choreography of rooms that never expected to welcome him. You okay? He asked. Yes, I said, realizing it was true. Oddly. He tipped his head toward the courtyard. You built that. I didn't touch a brick, I said. You rebuilt yourself, he said simply. Same thing. I looked down at the ring, plain, weighty, warm from the heat of my skin. I remembered the day he'd slid it across a blueprint. The Cape Cod project finished, our team gathered, the light in the studio honey thick. Not a proposal, he'd said then, voice thick with gratitude and grief for the mentor we both loved. A promise. To keep building what we started. He hadn't asked me to be his. He'd asked me to be mine. That was the difference. Across the courtyard, someone laughed too loudly. Someone else stumbled in heels on the lawn. The night wore its summer theater mask well. Elise materialized, cheeks flushed, eyes alive with gossip and friendship. So that's Liam Ward, she whispered, not whispering. He's different than I pictured. How did you picture him? I asked. Older. Scarier. More executive. He looks like a person. He is, I said. She leaned closer. So the ring. It's a story, I said. And the end isn't about weddings. She blinked, disappointed for the shelf labeled romance in her head. Okay, But you should know the whole lawn is writing the ending for you. They've been doing that since senior year, I said. They always pick the wrong genre. Elise laughed, squeezed my shoulder, and disappeared back into the glow. A voice behind us, warm and measured. Miss Pierce. I turned. Dean Harper, older now, silver hair like soft surf, posture still elegant as unbroken columns. She'd steered the school through recessions and scandals and still made time to hand out coffee on finals week. Dean, I said, standing. You look exactly the same. Liar, she said pleasantly. But I'll take it. I wanted to see you before tomorrow. Tomorrow. Her eyes twinkled. You'll forgive an old woman if she spoils nothing. Just arrive early to the quad. 10 o'clock. Good shoes for walking. We're dedicating something that needed your hands before it ever had your name. My name. She patted my arm, then shook Liam's hand. Mr. Ward. Thank you for what you did for the studio this year. Credit goes to Natalie, he said. Of course it does, the dean said, as if gravity had popped in to agree. She drifted back into the crowd, leaving the suggestion of a secret like a ribbon to follow. Ethan noticed the conversation. He never could stand being outside a circle. He and Ava slipped toward us, smiles polished. So, he said, all easy charm as if the last decade had been a minor scheduling conflict. What brings the famous Mr. Ward to our humble reunion? Gratitude, Liam said. This place made the person who saved my firm. Ethan's mouth twitched. Saved. From becoming ordinary, Liam said. Ava's laughter chimed. We've been admiring your ring, Natalie, she said, that soft sugar voice she used for women she wanted to shrink. It's so understated. Very you. Thank you, I said. Ethan lifted his glass. Understated's not how I remember you. I grew up, I said. Some of us just grow old, Ava added sweetly, as if she hadn't quite meant to say it out loud. A small silence spread like a spill. Careful, Dean Harper called from across the circle without looking. Aging comes for us all. But taste doesn't always arrive with it. Laughter real this time. Ava blushed, forced a grin. Ethan pressed forward undeterred. I've been leading Caldwell Design's coastal division. We've got 3 new builds on the island. Maybe we throw something your way, Natalie. A guest cottage? You weren't really into scale back then. Old Ethan, praise as a leash. The offer was a pat on the head dressed as opportunity. I'm not taking cottages this year, I said. Going bigger, he smirked. You always hated numbers. Buildings are made of decisions, I said. Numbers just tell the truth about them. He opened his mouth to volley. Liam's hand barely lifted, a quiet stop sign. Ava slid her arm tighter through Ethan's. We should do a toast, she announced too brightly, catching the coordinator's attention. To friends who become family. Of course. She needed a line. She always did. Glasses lifted. The saxophone trailed off. To friends, Ethan said, eyes on me. And to the people who know when they've found the right home. And to the people who learn to be their own, I said, touching my glass to Liam's. The saxophone eased back in, but the mood had shifted. You could feel it, the room recalculating where gravity lived. By the dessert table, the local reporter from the alumni magazine appeared with a camera and a notepad. Miss Pierce, she chirped. Can we grab a photo of you and Mr. Ward? We're running a feature tomorrow on the new sustainability wing. Ava froze. Ethan's smile stayed put, but his eyes hardened around the edges. Tomorrow, he said lightly. What's happening tomorrow? The reporter blinked, looked at me, then at Liam, suddenly aware of a line she hadn't meant to cross. Oh, well, the donor prefers, maybe I should excuse me. She vanished. Ava recovered first. A wing, she said. How lovely. Are you consulting, Natalie? Something like that, I said. Ethan's laugh scraped. Or are you just lending your name? Some people need to be attached to something big to feel big. Liam's voice was soft enough for only us. You don't have to do this. I know, I said, turning to Ethan. What's wrong with being attached to something big? If you built the foundation? He opened his mouth, closed it. Ava stepped in. So when's the wedding? She asked brightly, a little too loud, eyes flicking to my ring, to Liam, to the crowd she hoped to summon. There it was, the public needle. She couldn't help herself. Conversations around us quieted again. Firelight strobed across curious faces. The sea took a breath and held it. I could have explained. I could have said it's not an engagement ring. But I heard my mother in my head, the one thing she ever got perfectly right: don't correct a story. Replace it. Liam squeezed my fingers once. Not a question, not a claim, just a vote of confidence, and looked at Ava with a kindness she didn't deserve. We'll let the board make the announcement tomorrow, he said. The words seemed to flare and hang above the courtyard like fireworks in slow motion. The board. Announcement. Tomorrow. Ava blinked, confused. Ethan's face did what faces do when the architect changes the math on the load-bearing wall. It shifted, then cracked. What announcement? He demanded, trying to make it light and failing. Liam's smile didn't move. The kind where people stop guessing and start reading plaques. A murmur slid through the crowd like a current. Someone whispered, "Plaques." Someone else, "Is her name going on?" "Enjoy your evening," I said softly. Early day for those of us with good shoes. We moved away, the ring catching a slice of firelight. Not flashy, unignorable. As we crossed the lawn, Elise caught my eye, hand over her mouth, delighted and furious for me. "Text me," she mouthed. "Everything." At the edge of the property, the ocean threw a cold breath over us as if to say, "Steady." "Did I just lie?" Liam asked when we were out of earshot. "No," I said, my chest suddenly light. "You told the truth before they earned it." "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," I echoed, feeling the island tilt just a little toward me. Behind us, the bonfire popped. The music swelled. The old story started to come apart at its pretty seams. Morning came soft and gray, the kind of Nantucket morning that seems to forgive the night before without asking too many questions. I walked along the beach barefoot, the hem of my dress brushing the wet sand. The ocean breathed in rhythm beside me, a steady ancient sound that never chose sides. Last night's words still hung in my mind like smoke. The board will make the announcement tomorrow. I hadn't planned for it. Liam had simply known what I didn't yet have the courage to admit, that the past deserved witnesses, and justice sometimes needed stage lighting. The tide rolled closer. I bent down, picked up a small broken shell, imperfect but luminous, and held it up to the light. The sun slid out for a moment, turning it gold. I smiled. Even broken things catch the dawn. Back at the inn, the courtyard was already being transformed. White chairs lined the green, banners fluttered in the breeze, and the dean's staff hurried around with clipboards. People wore their Sunday confidence, linen, pearls, polite curiosity. I could feel it before I saw him, Ethan. He was standing near the stage, voice a little too loud, posture rehearsed. Ava hovered nearby, adjusting her dress, pretending to be calm. When his eyes found mine, they didn't hold arrogance anymore. Just confusion. The kind people get when they realize they're no longer the center of a story. "Natalie," he called, as if the crowd needed the reminder of who I was. "Can we talk?" I hesitated. "About what?" He lowered his voice when I reached him. "About last night. About whatever performance you and Ward are putting on." "It's not a performance," I said evenly. "Oh, come on. You always did love the moral high ground. What is this? Some big reveal. Maybe it's just closure." His laugh was sharp. "You think people will remember you after today? I built my name here. You built it on borrowed blueprints." His jaw tightened. "You still hold a grudge." "No," I said. "I hold memory." Before he could reply, Dean Harper tapped the microphone, her voice warm and strong. "If everyone could take their seats, we're ready to begin." The ceremony opened with the school anthem. Gentle, nostalgic, safe. Then the dean began to speak. 15 years ago, one of our own left this island with more questions than closure. Sometimes the world has to knock you down before you can design something that stands forever. I felt my stomach tighten. "She came back," the dean continued. "Not for revenge but to rebuild, and in doing so, she gave us something that will outlast us all." The crowd stirred. Ethan shifted beside Ava. The dean gestured toward the new glass and stone wing at the edge of campus, sunlight catching its curve. "Today we dedicate the Pierce Ward Design Wing, a space for sustainable architecture, collaboration, and second chances." Applause swelled like a wave. Cameras clicked. And there it was, the plaque. bronze polished, gleaming in the sun. The Pierce Ward design wing. In honor of vision rebuilt from ruin. Ethan's mouth opened but no sound came out. Ava clapped half-heartedly, smile frozen in place. Liam leaned closer and whispered, "Now they'll stop guessing." The dean gestured for us to join her on stage. "Natalie Pierce and Liam Ward, please." As we stepped up, I caught Ethan's gaze in the crowd. His expression had changed. Not anger, not disbelief. Something smaller. Recognition, maybe. The realization that the woman he'd broken had built something he could never buy. The dean handed me the microphone. I wasn't a public speaker. I was a designer. I built meaning out of silence and steel. But the words came anyway. I used to think love and legacy were built the same way. I began. That if you made them beautiful enough, they'd last. But beauty without integrity is just decoration. And integrity, I glanced at the plaque, then at the faces watching. Integrity is what stands when everything else falls. A hush settled over the crowd. Somewhere in the back, I saw Elise dab at her eyes with a napkin. "I want to thank the people who taught me both sides of that lesson," I said, voice steady. "The ones who left, and the ones who stayed." Liam reached for my hand. The gesture was small, but it echoed louder than any applause. When we stepped down, Ethan and Ava stood frozen in the front row. For once, they had nothing clever left to say. Later, at the reception under the white tent, the air hummed with whispers that had changed direction. People leaned in not to pity me anymore, but to understand how I'd done it. Ethan approached again, slower this time. The swagger was gone. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I know," I answered. "You really built that?" "With a team," I said. "But yes, my design." He looked around, jaw tight. "It's good work. That's what happens when you stop trying to impress and start trying to heal." His eyes flicked to Liam across the room. "And him? He's part of that healing." "Yes," I said simply. "But not the way you think." He nodded once, almost respectfully. "Guess we both grew up. Some lessons take longer than others," I said. He half smiled, then walked away, shoulders heavier but lighter somehow too. Ava didn't follow. She lingered a moment, studying the ring on my hand again, then whispered, "You got what you wanted." I met her eyes. "No, Ava. I got what I earned." The band started playing again. Something slow, something soft. Liam appeared at my side, offering his hand. "Dance with me," he said. "Here? In front of everyone. They're watching anyway." So I did. Barefoot on the grass, the ocean behind us, the plaque glinting in the sun like closure cast in bronze. For the first time in 15 years, the air didn't taste like salt and regret, just summer. The crowd thinned as twilight fell, laughter dissolving into the hush of waves against the pier. Fairy lights blinked across the courtyard, the same ones that had witnessed my humiliation years ago, now watching something gentler. Peace arriving quietly. I stood near the edge of the green, the plaque catching the last amber light of the sun. People had stopped posing for pictures, they just looked. And maybe that was the point, that truth didn't always need to shout. Sometimes it just needed to exist long enough to outlive the noise. Liam approached with 2 glasses of sparkling water. "Your speech was perfect," he said. "I didn't plan it." "Good. The heart doesn't draft." We clinked glasses. The bubbles caught the sunset for half a second before bursting. Fragile, beautiful, temporary. "I kept thinking," I said slowly, "how different this feels from what I thought closure would be." "And how's that?" "Quieter. I thought it would feel like winning. It feels like exhaling." He smiled. "Justice rarely makes noise. It just stops bleeding." I studied him for a long moment. "You know," I said, "people are going to assume things. They already do. And you're fine with that? Your story's yours. Let them think they know the ending. The real ones always hide in the middle." He looked toward the water. "I'm heading back to the mainland tomorrow. The Cape project's breaking ground next week. You should come by." "Maybe," I said, "after I visit a few ghosts." He nodded, understanding without needing explanation. By the time I reached my room, the moon had climbed high, silvering the edges of everything, trees, windows, even the small envelope resting under my door. My name in the dean's delicate handwriting. I opened it carefully. "Natalie, When you left this island, you were running from the version of yourself that loved too loudly. I'm glad you came back as the woman who builds quietly. The world remembers noise. It respects endurance. Thank you for reminding us that forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing the space they once took up inside you. Dean Harper. I read it twice. Once for understanding, once for grace. Then I folded the letter and slipped it into my bag. I already knew where I needed to go. The lighthouse stood at the edge of the world, or at least it felt that way. 15 years ago, Ethan had brought me here with champagne and a ring. The night had smelled like salt and forever. He'd promised the world and I'd believed him, because when you're 22, you mistake intensity for truth. Now the air smelled the same, but I was different. The sea had carved the rocks thinner, but it hadn't broken them. I knew the feeling. I sat on the railing, wind in my hair, and pulled the small gold ring from my finger. It glowed faintly in the moonlight. Not as a symbol of Liam, or of anyone else, but of everything I'd rebuilt in the years between heartbreak and today. You did your job, I whispered. You held me steady. I kissed it once, not out of sentiment but gratitude, then let it drop into the dark water below. It vanished without a sound. The waves accepted it like an offering, no ceremony, no applause. Just truth returning to tide. Back at the inn, I found Ethan sitting alone by the fire pit, tie undone, glass half full. The crowd had gone. The silence between us wasn't hostile anymore. Just history finally running out of words. Congratulations, he said. You deserved that. I didn't build it to deserve anything, I said. I built it because I could. He nodded slowly. Ava left. Said she needed air. Maybe she finally found it. He half smiled, the faintest ghost of the man I used to love. We were stupid kids. Yes, I said. But some ruins are worth visiting once, if only to see how they held up. He laughed softly, rubbed his jaw. You always get the last word. No, I said. I just build better endings. That night, I fell asleep with the windows open. The ocean hummed outside. Not forgiving, not vengeful, just constant. And for the first time, I didn't dream of what went wrong. I dreamed of foundations. Concrete poured smooth. Structures that held. Rooms filled with light. The ferry horn sounded once, low, distant, final. From my window, the island looked soft again, as if the previous night had exhaled everything sharp. The inn's courtyard was empty now, tables cleared, chairs stacked neatly in rows like a memory put away carefully. I poured coffee and stepped onto the balcony, watching the mist lift from the water. The plaque on the design wing caught the first blush of sunrise, in honor of vision rebuilt from ruin. Still didn't feel like victory, felt like balance. There was a knock at the door. Dean Harper stood there, holding a rolled blueprint tied with a blue ribbon. For you, she said. What is it? The final plans, she said. Your students will build it next semester. I thought you'd want to sign the first copy. I smiled, taking the blueprint. You don't waste time. Neither do tides, she said. They just keep showing up until everything changes shape. She studied me a moment longer, then added, By the way, your nameplate came in wrong. The engraver sent me an extra line. An extra line? She nodded, eyes bright. Under your name it says Architect of Second Chances. Should I have them fix it? I felt the laugh catch in my throat, the kind that almost becomes a sob. No, I said. Let it stay. By the docks, Liam was already loading his truck. He turned as I approached, sunlight glinting off his sunglasses. Leaving without saying goodbye? He asked. I figured we'd done that enough for one lifetime. He smiled. You sure you don't want to stay? The firm could use you full-time again. I built what I needed here, I said. Now it's time to build elsewhere. He nodded, no persuasion, no protest. Then promise me one thing. What's that? Keep the quiet you found here. Don't trade it for applause. I'll try, I said. He held out his hand. I shook it, no tension, no unfinished story. Just mutual respect where ambiguity used to live. Take care, Natalie. You too, Liam. He waited until I stepped onto the ferry before driving off, dust curling in the sunlight. The boat pulled away from the dock, cutting through the gray-blue water. The gulls followed for a while, then drifted back toward land. I unrolled the blueprint. On the corner, the dean's note in looping script. For the woman who turned betrayal into architecture. I smiled, tracing the lines of the new wing with my fingertip. Steel, glass, and light arranged into something that could outlast gossip, grief, or pride. The ferry rocked gently, and for a brief second, I thought I saw the gold ring glint beneath the waves. Or maybe it was just the sun playing tricks on water. Either way, it was enough. That night, back in Boston, I unpacked slowly, one bag, one memory at a time. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from a number I hadn't seen in months. "Sis, call me when you can. You won't believe what the caretaker found in Dad's beach house basement. Chris." I stared at it for a long moment, the corners of my mouth curving upward. Apparently, summer stories weren't done with me yet. Epilogue, voiceover, close. Sometimes the universe doesn't hand you revenge. It hands you blueprints. And if you're lucky enough to keep building, you realize justice isn't a headline. It's a structure that finally stands without you holding it up. Before you go, tell me in the comments, do you think silence can be a form of revenge? Or is peace the only real justice? Because next week, you'll hear what happens when family secrets echo through old walls. Next video. My brother mocked me for getting the beach house, until the old caretaker told him what Dad left in the basement.